Welcome to Reading and Writing Between the Lines, a podcast series about communication skills in the workplace. I'm your host, John Witzman. Join me as I speak with industry professionals and Conestoga faculty and alumni to explore their journeys with reading and writing skills. Follow us as we talk about how communications learning has changed over the years, how these skills are used in a wide range of industries, and the future of workplace communications. You've brought me to another place that I am always excited to go in this kind of conversation, and that is a discussion around the process of writing and the process of thinking. One of the things that we do try to incorporate in our formal communications curriculum is writing as a process, and helping developing writers to incorporate preliminary stages in their writing process, whether it's a plan or an outline, whatever you want to call it. And I think you've just spoken to that element as being really important to your work as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something that also that you find is a learning process for sort of junior associates coming in and doing the work before the work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people think, again, kind of going back to that thought of thinking you need to be a naturally gifted writer and these words just come out of you. And It's like, if you ever listen to a musician, they're telling you it's a process. They've gone back, they've gone over it. They've maybe, held the chorus because they haven't figured out the chorus yet. And then they go back and they figure it out later, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing is with writing. So you kind of approach it as you start with your research. You identify what are your goals, what are you trying to achieve with this piece of writing, who are your target audiences, and then you identify the summary and your key messages. And that, I find that in itself kind of gives you a bit of an outline. Then you actually write the piece.
Right.
You rewrite the piece. You probably rewrite it maybe another time, and then you give it to someone else to edit. Because we've learned that you don't see your own mistakes.
Absolutely.
And then you go back, you give it a final view, and then you send it off to the client. And then guess what? The client's going to have some edits as well.
Right. Yeah. And
it's a process.
It is, right. And I think that's probably so useful for people who might be listening to this to hear you break down the steps along the way to a finished product and to connect that to the kinds of assignments that they might be seeing in their coursework that is encouraging them to do a similar kind of approach, right? Where you are actually taking steps as opposed to that flurry of last minute inspiration, let's call it, that sometimes we do when we don't yet have a process, right? When we don't yet have a discipline.
It also, like in that research phase is number one, helps cut down that flowery, the part that people find difficult writing is pulling out that information. But if you do that research up front, it's gonna flow a lot more naturally, and it's not gonna be as painful in the writing process. So
Absolutely.
Do that reading up front, and your writing process will be so much easier.
You talked about the research process, the reading process, as being perhaps different now and different in a communications landscape than people might be thinking of when they think of reading. If they're listening right now, they're thinking of their textbook. They're thinking of that novel from grade 11 that they didn't particularly care for. And yet it's, from the sounds of it, so much broader than that. Can you just go back to that and sort of unpack again some of the things that fall under the umbrella of reading, of research in a kind of contemporary modern media landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I mentioned with part of our performance improvement plans that I share with all of our new hires is writing. Another piece of that is reading and being up to date with media and with social. It doesn't have to be a boring 200-page textbook. It can be, follow your favorite Instagrammers, and really look at like what are they writing in their posts and how are they positioning it?
Right.
Or reading media and how are newspapers or magazines, what kind of story angles are they focusing on? That also helps spark ideas in yourself that then you can go and pitch to your clients or how you can frame certain materials that you're writing on behalf of clients. Like, for example, top lists are the big thing right now. It's like top 10 restaurants in Kitchener-Waterloo, right?
Yeah.
Well, how can, that could spark something for you and your client. And then, maybe you're writing a blog post for the website that says, top 10 new things coming from my client or something. You know what I mean? Like you can really spark creativity from reading as well.
I think that's a great way of describing it, right? That it's not just a one-way process of taking in, but that you're also immersing yourself in this domain of literacy, right? Sort of writ large, broadly, and then you're meeting that with your own interpretations, your own impressions, your own criticisms or judgments, and then that's bouncing back out of you in a creative way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it also helps identify for the reader what works well and what doesn't work well, because they then see, okay, this article was really copy heavy and it was so dry, but this similar article on the same topic was actually really punchy and quick and to the point, and that kind of resonates as, okay, maybe that's how I need to translate my own writing, is kind of a punchier, shorter, condensed version of this.
And that marks the end of another episode of Reading and Writing Between the Lines, a podcast hosted by me, John Witzman, on behalf of the Communications Department and School of Interdisciplinary Studies at Conestoga College. You can find other episodes of this series on our YouTube channel, Reading and Writing Between the Lines. Stay tuned for more episodes. Thanks for listening.